such an honor to be with all of you this morning. So many heroes, some familiar faces and some that I've just met, who are so faithful in coming here when so many would rather stay home and take part of their busy days and go on with their lives, but are so faithful in recognizing the atrocity that we're facing so close to us right now, and the atrocity that's all across our country, and in taking a stand to do something about it. Because so many people are afraid or unaware or unwilling, but here, the people here are willing to stand up and to do something about it. So I'm honored just to be with you this morning and be with Father and the others that have just been so faithful in leading this prayer and protest and counseling to save lives. And I've heard that over 60 lives have been saved here in Germantown because of your faithfulness. That deserves a hand. That deserves celebration. I'm 24 years old, and I recently moved to Washington, D.C. area to start Live Action's office in the D.C. area in Arlington, Virginia. And my work in the pro-life movement is certainly not as long and faithful as many of you here, who may be a bit older than me and have been doing it maybe for as long as I've been alive or longer. Not to put an age on anyone here, but my involvement started when I was a teenager. And I found out about abortion as a young girl. I was 9 years old, looking for a book to read in my home, and I found a book called A Handbook on Abortion by Dr. and Mrs. Wilkie. And some of you may have heard of this book. Anyone familiar with this book? It's an old classic. And I pulled out this book. I was, kind of bored. I was homeschooled, so I had a lot of free time in the afternoons. And I found this book, and I pulled it out, and I thought, oh, this looks interesting. There was a woman on the cover with long hair, and I thought, this looks like it must be some sort of a history book, like it's from the 80s or something. It looked very old to me. Not that was that long ago, but for me, it seemed like history. And so I pulled it out, and it fell to the center, and there were images. And in shock and horror, I closed the book, and I pushed it away. I didn't want to keep looking at what I was seeing. And then gathering up a bit of courage, I pulled it back and I opened the book again. And what I was looking at was the image of a tiny child, only in the first trimester. The children here are second and third, but a tiny child with newly forming hands and feet, arms and legs, a tiny, newly forming little face, maybe 10 weeks old, who'd been the victim of an abortion. And as a child, as a 9-year-old, I thought, how could anybody do this to a baby? Is this real? Is this really happening? And I went and found my mom and I showed it to her and I said, is this real? Is this really happening? And she said, yes, and that's abortion. Now, many of you here might have had that encounter. You might have seen an image at some point and just been struck to the heart and thought, is this really happening? Are we really allowing this in our great nation? Are children like this really so unsafe and at threat of being killed? And as a young person, it makes my heart break to think that I was raised in a country where I thought I was so safe. My parents raised me well to be loved and cared for, that children that were my age, because I was born after Roe v. Wade, after abortion became legal, children just like me who weren't born to the same parents might have suffered a very different fate and never had the chance to enjoy life and live life the way that I have had that chance. And so as I got older and I learned the statistics, and you all I'm sure know them, almost 4,000 abortions a day, and these are just the ones that are counted for. There are over 1 million a year in our country, that the government gives almost $500 million to Planned Parenthood, the biggest abortion chain. The political interests that are tied into groups like the one here and abortionists like the one here, like Leroy Carhart. And I began to learn more about this and about how somehow abortion was a constitutional right because of Roe v. Wade. And so as a young girl, when I was about 12 or 13, I began to pray, and I would say, Lord, use me to do something about abortion. Use me to somehow save lives. Use me. And as many of you here probably know, it's a very dangerous prayer to ever ask God to use you to do something for Him. because he will use you. You're here this morning because you're willing to be used. You're willing to be a part of his will, his most loving and gracious and merciful will that wants all human beings, every human person, to be saved, to be close with him, to be loved, to be protected. That is the will of our loving, merciful Father. And so when we pray that prayer, God will use us in ways that we can't even imagine. And if we're faithful and persevere, and I'm one to talk, I've only been persevering a short time. You here have been persevering much longer than me, so many of you. But when you persevere and ask our Lord, what can I do for you? May I do your will? It's amazing the adventures he will take you on. I know it's true because it's in my life, the adventures that he's taken me on and the things I've gotten to do for a cause that only grew in my heart as I got older, that only deepened in my heart as I got older, and the things I got to do to advocate for our unborn brothers and sisters. You know, Christ says that whatever you do to the least of these, you do it unto me. Whatever you do to the least of these, you do it to Christ himself, to God himself. Christ, all perfect, all loving, all lovable Christ. Christ as a baby, Christ as a young man, Christ 33 years old nailed to a cross. Whatever you do to the least of these, you do it to me. And in our country today, who is more least? Who is the least in our country today? Who is the most at threat? Who is the most vulnerable today? And the most violenced? And it is our unborn brothers and sisters. It is the children where almost a third of us, a third of children unborn, end up killed by abortion in our great America, in our great nation. And they are the least of these. And so I think we're meant to take this call from Christ very seriously, and that's why we're here this morning, because this is a spiritual act of mercy. As much as it is a corporal act of mercy if we're out there offering life to the women going in, offering life to at pregnancy centers, teaching young people, whatever it might be. But it's an act of mercy where we're actually identifying with Christ himself to be here, to advocate for the unborn. Whatever we do to the least of these, we do it unto him. So this work can never be discounted. It can never be looked down on. It's not just another cause. It's not just another political issue, another social issue. Father mentioned wonderfully why this is so important, about the fundamental right to life, why this is different, and this is something that should catch our attention more than anything else, because we cannot have a nation that flourishes, that thrives if we kill our children. A democracy, a nation cannot survive that attack on those that are the weakest. Mother Teresa says that in a nation where a mother can kill her own child, what is left but for you and for I to kill one another? I don't think it's a surprise. I think there is a correlation, absolutely, between some of the violence we are seeing, even in our own country, the random shootings that are from groups that historically haven't done random shootings, the violence, the misunderstanding of sexuality, the breakdown of the family. It is all connected. And it starts because we forgot that basic faithfulness to the right to life for all people. Over the years, and you may have heard, we've done a lot of investigations of Planned Parenthood, of abortion clinics. And I've never found goodness in the clinic where they aren't doing something immoral, unethical, they aren't doing something illegal. Obviously, that's in the killing of the unborn child. But it extends to a disrespect and a disregard for the mother and for all others, and an unwillingness to follow the law, and a corruption that runs very deep. It's all connected. And I think the more that people are willing to share the truth of what they know, whether it is the hopefulness of the dignity of human life and why life is precious and created by God, or it's maybe the image of the child that's been killed by abortion. This is what abortion is actually doing to this child, or to your experience. Saying, I go to this clinic, Carhart's clinic, on Mondays or on other days of the week, and this is what he's doing. And people want to hear it. You may have faced some persecution from people that are close to you, or they don't want to listen to you. But it amazes me, going to UCLA, where I graduated from, and connecting with young people all across the country, the openness and the willingness to our message, the openness and the hunger, the thirst for this idea that life is precious. Our lives are precious. Young people are told every day in materialism and the sexualization of women and men, and in the misunderstanding of what life is, why life is meaningful. Every day they doubt their meaningfulness. They doubt the worthiness of their own lives. But it's amazing when you begin to share with them that life is precious, and that starts with the protection and the love of the life, even when it's unseen and most vulnerable in the womb, how people's eyes and hearts begin to open. And I've seen it at UCLA, I've seen it all across the country, and it is the hope that we have. Our generation is more pro-life than ever before. There are young people here this morning, and I'm sure there would be more. The more that we do it, the more that will come. And when I was a teenager, I remember having a pro-life meeting one day at my house, and no one came. And I had made the brownies and printed out some flyers and been all excited about the next live action meeting. I was probably 15 at the time. And no one showed up that day, and I found out they were, sending me emails, I had homework or this or that. And I remember thinking, I have homework too, I'm taking 5 APs or whatever. And why can't they understand how important this is? And my mother said, Lila, leadership is lonely, but you have to forge the path, and the people will follow in time. And it is true. And at the darkest moments is when God most wants us to trust Him and to reach out for Him and to walk with Him, even when we don't sometimes know where we're walking or what each step seems to be more and more difficult. And so this morning, be encouraged, please. I am so encouraged to see all of you here this morning and continue to come. The lives that are saved here makes it all worth it already. But there are more lives to be saved, and I believe with my whole heart that we're going to save so many more lives, and that we will see a country again. Whether it's in a month with a new president, which I believe will happen. I think that we're going to have a new president in a month. Or even if we lose the election. Or even if we lose the election and things may get worse and the persecution will get darker. But it's in those times that people sometimes most become aware of the darkness. And they can wake up to it when persecution can start. And then the new life can really burst forth. And God is all-powerful. Let us never forget that. And God cares more for these children than we ever could. He cares more for each one of us than we ever could. His love is boundless. And so He has a plan for our nation. I believe it. I believe our nation is special. I believe our nation is not going to decay and fall apart. I believe there's great hope and there's great new life bursting out of this nation. And it's going to create a new springtime in America. They talk about that springtime of the faith, Pope John Paul II. I believe there will be a springtime in our country. But darkness sometimes appears the harshest and the strongest right before the dawn. And that may happen, or it may be happening now. But it doesn't matter, because our call is still the same. Our call to prayer, our call to sacrifice, our call to be present here as you all have been so faithfully, to continue and to persevere. Because, and to quote again St. Paul, as Father Marcel did, St. Paul said, in due time you will reap the reward if you do not give up. And so let's never give up, and let's continue with our stand here for those that are the weakest and for unborn brothers and sisters. Thanks so much for having me here this morning, and keep up the good work.